Welcome back. Days after the U.S. shot down a suspected Chinese spy balloon, the first images of the debris were released by the U.S. Navy. The balloon, it was around 200 feet tall. Just wrap your head around that figure, 200 feet high. It was shot down early Saturday morning as it floated off the coast of South Carolina. The U.S. Navy is using underwater drones, warships, inflatable vessels to try and retrieve whatever pieces they can from this balloon. The debris are now being taken to an FBI lab in Virginia to analyze the capabilities of this balloon. What danger could it have possibly meant for the United States and for U.S. citizens? Remember, the U.S. insists that the balloon was used by the Chinese military for spying. While China has acknowledged that the balloon was indeed Chinese, they have called it a weather balloon that had blown off course. Now, this balloon has caused a serious diplomatic face-off between the U.S. and China. Just take a look at the series of events over the last 10 days. The balloon first entered American airspace towards the end of January, flying around the southern tip of Alaska. It then entered Canadian airspace to then float back into American airspace. It made its way over Montana, which is home to the Malmstrom Air Force Base, which is one of the 3 sites which operates and maintains the silo-based intercontinental ballistic missiles. Now, the balloon also cast a shadow over U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken's planned visit to Beijing. He was supposed to go there on the 3rd of February. Just hours before his departure, Blinken decided to postpone his trip. According to the U.S. State Department, the surveillance balloon had undermined the very purpose of the trip. The following day, the United States military shot down the balloon as it hovered over the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of South Carolina. A single missile fired from an F-22 Raptor stealth fighter jet brought down the balloon, which had been flying at about 60,000 to 65,000 feet. Remember, normal aircraft fly about 30 to 40,000 feet. This was flying about 20,000 feet higher. All flights were grounded in North and South Carolina shortly before the shooting down of the balloon. Now, Chinese President Xi Jinping currently has his hands full with domestic problems like the fallout of his zero-COVID policy, and perhaps he doesn't want to drag out the dispute with the United States, which could explain the rather muted reaction from China to the balloon being shot down. China claimed that the United States is using armed force to bring down the balloon, and that is an excessive reaction. It expressed strong discontent and protest against the U.S. action. The Chinese have also accused the United States of violating international norms by shooting down the balloon, but made no mention of the violation of international law. China has also said it would defend its legitimate rights in the interests of the enterprise involved, which could help it make the case that the government was not directly involved in launching this balloon. China has also refused a conversation with U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. In his State of the Union address, U.S. President Joe Biden made a reference to this Chinese balloon episode.
I'm committed to work with China where we can advance American interests and benefit the world, but make no mistake about it. As we made clear last week, if China threatens our sovereignty, we will act to protect our country, and we did.
Now, according to the United States, China's fleet of spy balloons have targeted several countries, including India. As per the Washington Post, the surveillance balloon effort has operated for several years now, partly out of the Hainan province, which is in the southern coast of China. They have collected information on military assets in other countries and areas of emerging strategic interest to China, including the Indo-Pacific, India, Japan, and of course the thorny issue of Taiwan. These surveillance airships are operated in part by the People's Liberation Army. They have been spotted over at least 5 continents. They are part of China's fleet of balloons developed to conduct surveillance operations, and they have violated the sovereignty of other countries apart from the United States. So, could the popping of a balloon turn into a watershed moment in the rivalry between the United States and China? The balloon crisis could exacerbate already tense ties where the U.S. and Chinese forces have come into very close contact, including over the South China Sea. U.S. officials are increasingly worried that Chinese state companies may be assisting Russia's military effort against Ukraine by providing technology and semiconductors, which may raise the pressure for action by the White House. The Biden administration is already expected to create a body to review outbound U.S. investments into China the next few months, and the new Republican House Speaker, Kevin McCarthy, is expected to follow in the footsteps of his Democratic predecessor, Nancy Pelosi, with a visit to Taiwan later this year. So Edward P. Joseph is Senior Fellow in SIAS Foreign Policy Institute, and Professor Victor Gao is Chair Professor of the Soochow University and former Chinese diplomat. Mr. Joseph, let me start with you first. The Chinese are saying that this was a weather balloon, it went off course, and the United States is making a big deal of it by shooting it down. It even found mention, although not directly, in President Joe Biden's State of the Union address. Is this balloon so big and so important that it's threatening to derail U.S. China ties, which saw a bit of a reset when both leaders met on the sidelines of the G20 in Bali back in November?
Absolutely no, I don't believe that this is going to derail anything. What it's done is it's strengthened the hand of the United States and it's weakened the hand of China. This is an embarrassment for China. It's an embarrassment in several ways. First, it's clear that China technically doesn't control by its own admission. It doesn't control these balloons, which it claims, of course, is merely a weather balloon. But obviously, it failed by China. Again, there can be no denial in China. This is proven. So technologically, China is showing inept. Second is it appears that given the timing of this, when Secretary of State Tony Blinken was meant to visit Beijing, it appears that probably Xi Jinping may not have even known about this. So this suggests that there's inadequate communication, that at the highest levels, the Chinese leadership may not even be aware of what the defense and surveillance and intelligence apparatus is even doing at such a sensitive moment. And third is it exposes, as your report accurately conveyed, it exposes that this is part of a widespread Chinese surveillance program, which is, of course, the last thing that China needs is to have the exposure of this, that this spy satellite, spy balloon, which has been replicated, as your report mentioned, in other countries. This shows, again, it is an embarrassment for China to have, by definition, a program that's meant to be secret come into such public scrutiny. And of course, China will try to deny it. But it will be credible, not only here, not in the United States, but nowhere.
Professor Victor Gao, what is worrying about this balloon episode is a couple of things. Number one, remember, the debris of all of this is being tested in a lab in Virginia. If the United States were to put out, military surveillance equipment or the remains of it from this debris out in the public domain, then this whole theory of China is that this was a meteorological balloon and it just strayed off course. And if it strayed off course, why do you have to fire the Met chief? China over the weekend fired the chief of the Met Department in your country. Almost like an admission of guilt, if you will.
First of all, the Chinese government has already told the whole world that this balloon or the airship is for peaceful purposes. It's a weather balloon. Secondly, the United States is the largest military power in the world, and to use its lethal military force to shoot down what? Not an ICBM, but a balloon from the sky is indeed overreaction. Now, I think the United States missed one very important philosophical point. That is, both China and the United States live in the same world. Both China and the United States share one same atmosphere. Now, I understand this airship or balloon normally will fly at a height about 40,000 meters. That's about 4 times the normal height for commercial airplanes or military airplanes. And what is the legal status of stratosphere that high, way above ground, 40 kilometers above ground? Whether that still constitutes territorial space or not, I think legally there is no settlement on that point. And
but Professor Gao, why do you want to fly?
United States has
just give me a 10-second rebuttal. Why do you want to fly something in the first place? 40 kilometers from the surface of the Earth. I mean, like you say, modern day aircraft fly at 30,000 to 40,000 feet. This was flying at 60,000 to 65,000 feet. Why do you need to fly such a thing in the first place? Isn't that what is raising suspicion?
Listen, it's way above 60,000 feet. It's about double the height you mentioned. I think the fact that it descended to 60,000 feet was because of getting out of control due to malfunction or due to force majeure. I think mankind has the right to do scientific research of all kinds if they are safe, if they do not constitute a threat to any civilians, for example, or military, and if, for example, even the Pentagon acknowledged that this balloon or airship was harmless to the Americans on the ground, both civilians and the military. Therefore, given all these facts, especially given the fact that the United States has been using balloon again and again and again over the years and decades against China. One of the balloons was shot down by the Chinese jet fighter before. We have the evidence of that.
So let me ask Professor Edward Joseph.
Have the whole world know
what is it? What is it that a balloon flying at 60,000 feet? What more espionage can it do, or what more information can it get by way of spying? Any more than modern day satellite scan and radars and even physical assets that countries have to do exactly this kind of stuff. I mean, what can a balloon possibly at 65,000 feet procure in terms of information that satellites and radars can't?
I think that's a very interesting question, and that's exactly as you alluded to in your other point, which was quite correct, is that this is exactly what the experts in Virginia, not very close to where I am here. These are led by the FBI, which leads in counterintelligence in the United States. That's exactly what they'll be looking at. They will be examining what they've recovered from this spy balloon, and they'll be determining. Those are exactly the questions that they will be looking at. What are its capabilities? Did it have one of the key questions? Is did this balloon have real-time capability to send intelligence back to China, or was it meant to store that? That's one of the key questions that they will be looking at. So, and again, the denials, this will, of course, disprove any denials that China will make about this topic. But those are the questions that exactly that the FBI and others in the U.S. intelligence community will be examining as
Professor
they
Gao,
look over this.
When both leaders...
One other thing is that the U.S. Benefited, and deliberately, an additional reason why it did not want to shoot down the balloon was they were monitoring the balloon to try to detect and learn its capabilities as it passed across the United States, and as the U.S. took countermeasures at sensitive locations to prevent any intelligence collection by China.
So Professor Gao, there seemed to be a bit of a thaw, if you will, or a reset in ties between Beijing and Washington when both leaders met in Bali in November. Has this balloon now blown all of that hope up in the air?
If you allow me to make a point or prediction, let me make that. I think Secretary of State Blinken will make it to China sooner or later. And I hope sooner rather than later. Why? Because for Secretary of State Blinken to visit China is not just a favor for China. It's a must for the United States. How can you imagine a world where the two largest economies do not talk with each other? That's a recipe for disaster. Therefore, Secretary of State Blinken should be advised that visiting China, engaging with the Chinese government and with the Chinese leaders is a beneficial thing for the United States.
But Professor Gao, again, I'm sorry I'm intervening, but there is a basic problem there, and that is that if you have to have any conversation, you have to have a certain degree of underlying trust. The United States is saying that underlying trust has been blown by this balloon.
Allow me to emphasize one point. For years, the Chinese government has again and again and again accused the United States of violating China's sovereignty and territorial integrity. And this time, it is really very entertaining to see that Secretary of State Blinken is accusing China of violating U.S. sovereignty and territorial integrity.
All right.
I hope Secretary of State of Blinken should go to the file and see how many protests China has filed against the United States over the years and over the decades.
Okay, I got to leave it at that.
Inconsistent
All I'll
US
say,
violations
yeah,
of
I'm
China's
completely out of time.
sovereignty
Sorry,
and
Professor Gao, and
integrity.
thank you very much, Edward Joseph. All I'll say as I wrap this up is that brief interim between November and late January, when it was felt that 2023, at least before the political cycle kicks in 2024 in the US, you could see some kind of a brief reset in U.S. China ties. I think it's fair to say that balloon has completely blown up all that hope. We'll see how this story plays out in more ways than one. That's a wrap. In a moment, Palki will join you with that.